The noble swordsman lineage that protected the Arcadia Empire was the House of Cardenas, a powerful military force guarding the peace of the vast empire. They were known as the Seven Orders of Knights of Cardenas. Each possessed military power comparable to a small or mid-sized nation. Standing amidst a field of fallen blades under a crimson moon, a lone warrior gripped a tattered banner, embodying the legend that before even being born, they were revered as golden dragons. Among them, the elite force composed solely of direct descendants was the Golden Dragon Order. The direct bloodline of Cals, inheriting the Cardenas lineage in its purest form, was called the Golden Emperor. A figure clad in blue armor and a flowing red cape stood tall against the darkness, his presence a testament to their legacy. Born with golden hair and golden eyes, they represented the living proof of the direct Cardenas bloodline. A massive golden dragon manifested in a roar of spirit and flame, for it was said the blood of dragons flowed within them. Young dragons who awakened that blood were a sight to behold. In a sun-drenched landscape, students with varying hair colors looked on, knowing that from direct descendants who wielded supernatural powers called traits due to the density of their blood, to collateral descendants striving to surpass their own limits, everyone trained and tested their strength at this Cardenas training ground. The sound of clashing steel rang out as young warriors engaged in fierce combat. A young man with vibrant golden hair and focused yellow eyes gripped his wooden spear with gloved hands, his expression intense as he moved. Another clash occurred as a girl with long blonde hair swung her blade against a male opponent, sparks flying with every impact. The youth with the red tie stood amidst the dust, his gaze sharp and unwavering. The blonde girl gasped in shock, realizing there was no way this could be happening. Hidden by the leaves of a nearby tree, witnesses watched the fight, one noting they were thinking the same thing. Even with number 1, someone thought 2 against 1 would be tough. Another impact shook the ground as the fierce exchange continued. The girl looked back in disbelief, stunned to think number 4 was taken down instantly. She groaned in pain, struggling against the overwhelming pressure of the wooden sword pressing down on her own. A piercing light suddenly shot forward as a blue aura flared with lethal precision. She cried out in fear, her eyes wide as she realized she could not read his sword strikes. With a flash of blue energy, she was struck down, her scream of agony echoing through the clearing. She collapsed to the dirt, her hand trembling against the soil as she thought that facing both of them, she never imagined direct descendants who awakened their traits could be overwhelmed like this. Towering over her, the victor looked down with cold contempt, telling her she was not even close to his level. Glancing back at the defeated number 4, he declared them too weak, stating they were no different from collateral trash. His golden eyes narrowed with a dark intensity as he decided that either way, this ended now. Gripping his weapon, he proclaimed himself the winner of this selection. Far above the training grounds, the Cardenas headquarters of the Direct Knight Order reached toward the sunset sky. Inside the monitoring room, a man observed the screens, commenting that the trainees this time were truly exceptional. He turned toward his subordinates, asking who was worthy of the special class. This was the young Dragon Knight Order commander, Swordmaster Pabian. A man with graying hair sighed, agreeing that while there were many talented ones this time, only one had the qualification. He identified the candidate as number 1, William Cardenas. He pointed out that William had injured both number 2 and number 4. On the screen, William stood triumphantly over his fallen peers, their identification tags scattered on the ground. Pabian took a deep breath, finding it hard to believe that number 2 was a direct descendant, asking for confirmation. His subordinate confirmed it was indeed correct. As for the others, it was practically annihilation. Shards of broken stone fell through the air as the report continued, stating the collateral descendants had nearly been wiped out, with only a few remaining within direct descendant squads. A blue-haired girl knelt in the woods, surrounded by unconscious trainees. Pabian grunted, observing that the wall of blood remained unbroken. He stood tall in his red cape, noting that in this training ground, a lower number meant higher strength. An icon of a crowned figure labeled number 1 stood at the peak of the hierarchy. Number 1 represented the peak among all trainees. Pabian considered that naturally, number 1 should be the special class, but this time, there was no need for comparison. He decided they would appoint William as the special class. Suddenly, another voice cut in, telling him to wait. The men turned to see a bearded man who suggested they observe a bit longer. Pabian asked for the reason, and the man explained there was one unusual collateral descendant remaining. He believed it would be better to judge after seeing his ability. Looking up at the massive monitors, Pabian asked for his number. The instructor replied that it was number 25. Pabian's eyes widened slightly as he realized that even among collateral lines, some managed to rise. He mused that if he was number 25, he must have some skill. Sunlight filtered through the ornate chandeliers of the hall as he added that while he was not someone to expect much from, he still had expectations. In a lush forest, a young man with golden hair walked alone, his sword resting across his shoulders. Pabian thought that if the chief instructor said so, there must be a reason. The chief instructor's mouth set in a thin line, focusing on that number 25, Leonard Cardenas. He recalled how a few days ago, Leonard suddenly began standing out. In a vision of the past, Leonard stood over a field of dozens of defeated trainees trainees, his spear in hand as he defeated everyone in his path. In that short time, he had climbed from 381st to 25th. Back in the monitor room, an officer stammered that it was impossible. The instructor told him to look at the monitor, explaining that this was Leonard's one-on-one duel with number 1. On the screen, the two combatants faced each other, a palpable tension rising between them. William, labeled as number 1, stared at the approaching challenger, number 25. William let out a condescending chuckle, commenting that Leonard had nice guts for coming at him personally. He grinned wickedly, asking if Leonard was there to surrender. He mocked him, saying it was too bad because he was not planning to hold back. Leonard stood his ground firmly, simply replying, "Good." As the wind rustled the leaves, Leonard stated that then he would not hold back either. William's eyes dilated with fury, his golden pupils glowing as he hissed that Leonard was insignificant trash. A violent blue aura erupted around William, the ground cracking under the pressure as he commanded Leonard to draw his sword, promising to make him regret this. Leonard remained calm, observing number 1 and noting that his presence was completely different. He smiled softly to himself, beckoning his opponent to come on and show him what he had. Leonard vowed he would make William regret this too, wanting to see how far he could go as he was now. With a sudden burst of speed, William lunged forward, his feet kicking up dust. He leapt into the air, a trail of red aura following his descent as he closed the distance. William roared that he would crush him along with that sword. A massive shockwave of blue energy erupted as the two blades collided. The force of the impact shattered the ground, sending sparks and mana flying in every direction. William's eyes widened in shock as Leonard blocked the heavy strike with his simple wooden sword. The two gritted their teeth, struggling for dominance as the sound of grinding wood filled the air. Leonard skillfully slid his blade against William's, redirecting the force. He moved with a fluid grace, sidestepping the next strike and sending William staggering past him. William skidded across the dirt, his eyes wide as he looked back at his opponent. Leonard stood perfectly poised, holding his sword with ease. William sputtered, thinking of his sword, and declared that it was not something a trainee knight could break. He bared his teeth in rage, feeling mocked by Leonard's calm demeanor. He shouted that Leonard was mocking him, a blue flame of mana engulfing his arm as he prepared to strike again. William unleashed a series of rapid slashes, his blue aura trailing through the air like a storm. Leonard parried every single one, his movements minimal and precise. Sparks rained down as the blades met again and again. In the observation room, the instructors watched with fascination. One remarked on the interesting sword style, noting it was not the orthodox Cardenas technique. The gray-haired man smiled, impressed by the lack of wasted motion. Pabian watched intently, seeing that Leonard was blocking everything with minimal force. He realized with a start that the boy had not even launched a proper attack yet. Frustrated, William yelled at him to stop darting around. He lunged forward, demanding to know if running was all he could do. He swung his sword in a wide arc, a massive wave of blue energy tearing through the foliage and carving a path in the earth. Leonard performed a perfect backflip, narrowly avoiding the destructive wave. He landed softly on his feet, his eyes never leaving his opponent. Leonard's boot slammed into the ground, propelling him forward. He vanished into a blur of motion, clashing with William in a series of bone-jarring impacts. The two warriors traded blows across the clearing, the sounds of their fight echoing like thunder. William grew increasingly desperate, his aura flaring wildly as he tried to pin Leonard down. Every strike he threw was expertly parried or dodged with a stoic expression. William realized his power was real. He barked that Leonard had been running his mouth while dodging and demanded he fight seriously. A pulse of energy knocked Leonard back, but he adjusted instantly. William stared at him, his eyes narrowed as he recognized that not just power, but his judgment was sharp too. William gripped his sword with both hands, his blue aura intensifying as he wondered how to defeat the black dragon. Leonard moved through the gusts of wind, reflecting that what he was missing was still the instincts and judgment forged at the edge of life and death. He calculated that even for a top trainee, this was the limit. In a blur of motion, the two crossed paths. William gasped in shock, asking what was happening as he felt a sharp impact. He groaned in pain, clutching his side as he was pushed back. The trainees watching from the sidelines were stunned, one claiming there was no way this was possible. They watched in awe as the boy traded blows with number 1, wondering if that person really was number 25. To the witnesses, he seemed like a completely different person. Leonard moved with a speed that defied the eyes, a streak of light following his path. William looked around frantically, his teeth gritted in panic as he realized he lost sight of him. He spun around, shouting to ask where Leonard went. Suddenly, Leonard appeared directly behind him, his presence as hot as a flame. William's face twisted in horror as he shouted that this was impossible. He screamed, asking how someone like Leonard could do this. Leonard looked at him with cold, red eyes and spoke calmly, telling number 1 that he lost. With a massive swing, a golden arc of energy sliced through the air, shattering William's defense and sending him flying through the trees. The impact was devastating, leaving William coughing up blood, his body broken and defeated. As Leonard stood over him, he thought that if it were his old self, this would have been impossible. But he realized that now, all his memories had returned. Memories of his past life as Len, once known as the greatest sword emperor under the heavens. The story began with Ren, a man who walked the lonely path of the sword. He reached a legendary realm where he could easily rend the heavens and crush even mountains with a single strike. Clad in dark armor with flowing white hair, he held a jagged black blade that pulsed with a crimson aura. By his own singular strength, he earned the fearsome title of Sword Emperor. But still unsatisfied with his mastery, he finally challenged the heavenly demon, hailed as the strongest of the era, to a deadly duel. The battle lasted for many grueling days, its intensity reaching a height far beyond human comprehension. Ren screamed with raw effort as he swung his blade against the demon, their clashing spirits causing massive explosions of light. It was said that the landscape of the entire region was completely transformed by the sheer force of their combat. And yet, the result was a bitter defeat under a blood-red moon. Ren lay collapsed on the fractured earth, his body broken and bloodied as he panted for breath. He could not understand it, thinking that his swordsmanship should have been perfect. His eyes grew dim as he asked himself why his blade did not even graze his opponent. Standing over him with a cold smirk, the heavenly demon spoke of basics, telling Ren that he never truly understood the sword. He looked down with contempt, claiming Ren merely swung it for the sake of his own life. As Ren gripped the hilt of his sword with a trembling hand, the demon explained that his immaturity and neglect of the fundamentals became fatal in the end. Ren looked up from the dirt, blood trickling down his face as he repeated the insult, wondering if he really lacked basics. He found the words to be meaningless, even as the demon looked back one last time. The demon admitted that while Ren was no more than a stray dog, the fact that he challenged him and fought so far was truly admirable. He promised to show respect to the one departing this world, telling the fallen warrior to go in peace as the last of the Sword Emperor. Ren stared at the sky as his vision failed, wondering if it really ended so easily. In his final moments, a desperate wish formed, hoping that if he could just start over once more, his sword might finally be able to reach him. Reaching a blood-stained hand toward the moon, the legend of Sword Emperor Ren ended in complete defeat. However, at that moment, in a place no one could have imagined, a new legend was about to begin. Under the soft glow of a full moon in a different time, a group of young trainees stood over a fallen boy. They checked his breathing and worried if they should call an instructor, until the boy suddenly snapped awake and gasped for air. This was Leonard, a trainee marked with the number 381. He sat up on the dark training ground, confused by the dream that felt so real. The other trainees mocked him, noting that he was alive after all and that they thought he was dead for sure. But suddenly, as Leonard looked up, something was different. His eyes burned with a sharp, lethal intensity that took the bullies by surprise. One of them recovered his sneer, telling Leonard that since he seemed fine, they should continue from before. The bully lunged forward with a closed fist, shouting that Leonard had scared the hell out of him. With a dull thud of impact, the punch was caught. The bully froze in shock, asking how Leonard could have stopped it. Leonard looked down at his own hand in surprise, realizing his body moved on its own. He wondered what this strange sensation was as he stared at his palm. The bully grew enraged, calling him a bastard and claiming he only caught it by luck. He drew a wooden sword and swung it with all his might, telling Leonard not to get carried away. Leonard moved like a blur, dodging the strike with ease. The attacker stammered as he realized Leonard had dodged it perfectly this time. Leonard felt the flow of his movements, realizing again that his body was moving on its own as if something was guiding him. With a swift movement, he countered, sending the bully crashing to the ground. The witnesses retreated in fear, shouting that it was not luck and that he was completely toying with them. They could not understand how the guy who had been helpless moments ago was suddenly so different. Panicking, they realized he was like a completely different person. One of the bullies told the others not to freak out, suggesting they crush him together. Leonard watched them approach with a calm, knowing smile, realizing he finally understood and remembered everything. In a flurry of strikes, he moved through them, his wooden sword striking with the precision of a master. He recalled the strange dreams he had been having of a man with long white hair fighting under a crimson sky. Those dreams had tormented him so much he could not focus on his current training, and he had resented them for a long time. But now, the life and death of Ren, the Sword Emperor, were returning to him with vivid clarity. He stood amidst the fallen trainees, realizing there was only one conclusion. He was the reincarnation of Ren from another world. He found it hard to believe reincarnation existed, but he felt the truth in his soul. He wondered if his desperate wish at the moment of death had been granted. He winced as he looked at his current arm, noting that just swinging a sword a little made him hurt because he had trained recklessly before. But he knew that from now on, with these memories and techniques, he would become overwhelmingly strong. Walking away from the training grounds, he did not care if it was coincidence or fate. Ren could not achieve his goal, but Leonard vowed that he would. He resolved to use everything he possessed to become the strongest Sword Emperor, surpassing even his past life. Later that night at the Cardenas training grounds, higher-ranked students gathered to discuss the incident. They noted that 3 of their members were injured and would be useless for the upcoming field training. Though their strength would decrease, they believed the plan would still be easy. One student mentioned that the person who defeated all 3 was a single individual, number 381. They heard the fight was over almost instantly. When they learned the numbers of the defeated were 329, 257, and 100, 133. They were shocked by the high ranks Leonard had overcome. They worried that if someone like that joined another faction, the balance of power would shift. A voice cut through their chatter, telling them to watch their mouths. It was William, the legendary number 1. Blue electricity crackled around his sword as he asked if they thought he would be shaken by a single weakling. Referring to number 381, he ordered them to bring Leonard to him along with a few others. Looking out into the night with a cold, predatory gaze, William decided that if the boy was worth using, he would judge him himself. The heavenly demon, his face partially obscured by a dark hood, offered a final gift for his opponent's journey into the afterlife. He explained that the reason the warrior could not reach a higher stage was because he had established his internal energy foundation much too late. Ren lay broken and bleeding in the center of a massive crater, listening as the demon noted that in the 5 elements, foundation and balance were of utmost importance. Staring down at the defeated Sword Emperor, the demon remarked that if he had built that foundation while he was still young, the result might have been different. Ren's eyes grew dim as the cold truth settled in. Back in the present, Leonard sat in deep meditation, surrounded by a swirling vortex of blue mana, acknowledging that by the time he had built his internal energy foundation in his previous life, he had already passed the ideal age. He realized that if he solidified the foundation starting from this young age, things would change. Focused and determined, he vowed to first create a constitution that could handle mana. A concentrated sphere of energy spun rapidly before him, condensing into a brilliant spark. As the aura settled, Leonard looked at his glowing palm and knew he had succeeded. He reflected that even as the greatest in the world, he had struggled at this age due to a lack of internal energy, yet now he wondered about the true nature of the Cardenas bloodline. Sunlight washed over the Grand Academy buildings where a banner of the Cardenas house hung proudly. Inside the dining hall, other trainees moved about with their meals. Leonard took a bite of his food, finding that it actually tasted quite good. He reminded himself that a balanced diet was vital during the growth period, so he had to eat everything without skipping meals. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over his table as a student addressed him as number 381. The large trainee, bearing the number 7 on his tag, mentioned he had heard about Leonard's fight yesterday and asked if he was more hot-headed than expected. He noted that Leonard usually ate like a bird, but today he had a great appetite and had almost finished the whole plate. Leonard looked up and asked if the boy was number 8. The trainee corrected him, claiming he was number 7 now because he had knocked out the previous holder just the other day. Watching the boy flex his muscles, Leonard realized it was a system where higher numbers were stolen through duels. He coldly asked what the boy wanted, prompting a sigh from number 7, who claimed Leonard was being cold when he was about to share something useful. He explained that the atmosphere had been murderous lately because the top-ranked trainees were moving to expand their influence. He reminded Leonard that number 1, number 2, and number 4 were all making moves. Leonard stood up with his tray, stating he already knew about those with the blonde hair and golden eyes. Number 7 panicked, telling him to be careful because people might hear him. Leonard ignored the warning and demanded to know what he really wanted. The big student clutched his head in frustration, asking if Leonard was dense or just crazy, noting he seemed like a completely different person. He argued that there was definitely a reason the elites were expanding their influence and insisted they would not survive unless they united. Leonard stopped and asked what the boy wanted him to do. Number 7 explained that more than half of the 500 trainees had already joined the elite factions, but there was no rule saying only direct descendants could form a group. He revealed he was planning to join forces with number 3 and number 9 from the upper ranks and invited Leonard to combine his strength with theirs. Leonard simply refused, stating he did not belong anywhere and preferred to be alone. However, he admitted the information was helpful and told the boy he owed him one. As Leonard walked away, number 7 stood frozen in confusion, wondering if the guy had hit his head, certain this was not the number 381 he used to know. The sky turned a brilliant orange as Leonard exited the building through a grand archway. He sensed a presence and asked if they had some business with him. A pair of trainees stepped out of the shadows, and their leader asked if the food was good. He told Leonard he had a mountain of things to say for his own reasons, but before that, he declared that number 1 was calling for him. He offered to overlook the previous day's incident as a special favor, explaining that number 1 took an interest because Leonard had turned down the invitation from number 7. Leonard realized that everything happening there leaked back to the top, thinking it was quite professional for a bunch of kids playing at faction wars. He told them he was not interested and commanded them to get lost. Infuriated, the trainee called him a piece of trash and pointed out his low rank, vowing to make him regret those words as he lunged forward with a wooden sword. Leonard moved with blinding speed, disappearing from the attacker's line of sight. The other witness, number 98, watched in awe as Leonard closed the distance with a single kick, recognizing that such physical ability at a young age was extraordinary. Leonard struck out bare-handed, shocking his opponent as he caught the blow. The boy stammered, wondering what Leonard was, only to cry out in horror as Leonard shattered the wooden sword with his grip. With a powerful strike, Leonard sent the boy crashing into the stone ground. Looking down at the fallen trainee, Leonard noted he was number 157 and possessed impressive skill for someone not in the top ranks. He mused that there really really was a secret in the Cardenas bloodline. He turned his gaze to number 98, noting the boy had realized he had no chance of winning and asked if he still wanted to continue. Number 98 gritted his teeth and yelled for Leonard to shut up, claiming he was stronger and telling him to stop acting so high and mighty. Leonard accepted the challenge and moved in a flash of light. A massive impact shook the walls of the nearby building as the number 98 tag was sent flying through the air. High above in a window, a masked figure observed the entire scene, noting with a chuckle that Leonard had completely toyed with his opponent. The observer, a man known as Owl, wondered if the boy had been hiding his true strength until now. He found it strange because for an informant, the boy's origin seemed clear. Leonard suddenly looked up, locking eyes with the hidden observer. Owl gasped, startled that the boy had noticed his gaze from such a distance. He composed himself and decided that either way, this looked like it would be a major upset, hoping Leonard would spare him the usual predictable developments. He declared he would be expecting much from the boy before writing the name Cardenas Leonard on his clipboard. Standing over the defeated group, Leonard was already number 98 now. The morning energy at the Cardenas Academy was electric as rumors spread through the hallways. One student shouted with urgency, telling his peers to hurry because word was out that number 98 was heading toward the training grounds. Trainees dashed through the corridors, their boots thumping against the stone floor in a frantic race. In the chaos, two students collided, leading to a quick apology as one explained he was in a great hurry after being told to catch number 98. Watching the commotion from above, a young woman with long blonde hair and sharp yellow eyes observed the scene with interest. She mused to herself if number 1's lackey had really lost, noting that the boy supposed to be his subordinate was fairly high-ranked. She leaned against a pillar, recognizing that the rumors of an incredible kid appearing lately were likely true. This was number 2, Burita Cardenas. Burita walked through the training grounds, her eyes falling on a defeated student groaning on the dirt. She watched as Leonard moved with lethal efficiency, his body a blur of motion. As a high-ranked trainee tried to recover, Leonard drove his heel forward in a powerful kick that sent the boy tumbling back. Another opponent lunged at him with a wooden sword, shouting for the brat to just give up and join their squad. Leonard avoided the strike with a fluid step, replying firmly that he already told them he refused. As he parried another blow, Leonard wondered if the number 1 guy was an idiot despite his strength, questioning how many times he had to say the same thing before it was understood. With a series of rapid movements, he neutralized the remaining attackers, their bodies hitting the ground with heavy thuds. Leonard reached down and snatched a wooden badge from a fallen student's chest, stating coldly that he would be taking it. The defeated boy clutched the grass and hissed a curse in frustration. Burita stepped forward, offering her congratulations and noting that with his victory, he had been promoted to number 25. Leonard looked back at her with glowing red eyes, and she met his gaze without flinching. Her pupils dilated as her special ability activated, allowing her to see the inner workings of his body. She spoke of his strange constitution and the precise flow of his energy, noting the new badge he held in his hand. Leonard watched her closely, recognizing the use of clairvoyance and thinking it was an interesting trait. He estimated her vision was at the level of the mind's eye, a rare mastery for a girl her age. The mind's eye was a legendary weapon that allowed its user to see an opponent's intent and inner self, proving effective even against superior enemies. Burita smiled softly, seeing a powerful trait worthy of his new rank. She then asked why he hated teaming up so much, warning him that he would not be able to handle the next day's training alone. Leonard turned away, telling her to simply leave it at that. A heavy, oppressive aura suddenly flooded the area as William Cardenas, the number 1 trainee, arrived. He looked at Burita and asked if she were a fool, accusing her of being about to leak all their information. He stepped on a fallen student's chest, groaning that he had ended up coming there himself because his useless trash subordinates could not even handle simple chores. The boy beneath his boot cried out in agony as William ground his heel down. Leonard observed the elite student, noting that this was the famous number 1 and admitting he certainly possessed charisma. Leonard addressed him directly, noting they finally met, but was interrupted by William's cold glare. Leonard did not back down, stating he could still fight and asking if William wanted to go right then. William's face twisted in rage as he asked the brat who he thought he was talking to. The tension was broken by Burita's sudden laughter. She clutched her side, telling Leonard he was an interesting person and noting she had never seen anyone take such an attitude with number 1 before. She suggested they call off the confrontation, pointing out that number 25 had no intention of joining them and reminded everyone that they had training tomorrow. William relaxed his grip on his weapon, agreeing with her plan and claiming he only came to see what kind of guy Leonard was. As he turned to leave, his eyes glowed with a predatory yellow light, telling Leonard not to regret provoking him. Leonard replied with a blunt affirmation, telling him fine. As the sun set, Leonard reflected on the internal training methods and the drive to build influence within the direct line. A formal announcement declared that the next morning would be the start of joint training. Deep within the Great Forest, senior instructor Bruno adjusted his red cape and asked his aide if the trainees had gathered yet. The aide confirmed they were all present but mentioned a peculiar trainee who appeared while squads were being formed. Bruno commanded him to explain in detail. The aide revealed that one boy intended to participate in the training alone without forming a squad. Bruno was skeptical, asking if the boy had been told all the details. The aide confirmed he had been briefed on the field training in the Great Forest, where students were expected to be self-sufficient in hunting and securing shelter. He also noted that while there was no limit on squad sizes, the others had formed factions led by the top 4 elites. He listed the groups, stating that A Squad was the largest and led by number 1. B Squad followed under Burrita's leadership, while C Squad was made of trainees not of the direct bloodline. D Squad was led by the strategist number 4, and E Squad consisted of outcasts led by a low-ranked trainee. Finally, he identified number 25, Leonard Cardenas, as F Squad, acting all by himself. Leonard walked through the sun-drenched woods, thinking that the training grounds were incredibly vast. He adjusted the pack on his back, deciding it would be best to secure a base early. Bruno suddenly appeared behind him with silent footsteps, asking if that small bag was all the luggage he brought. He noted Leonard only had a bare minimum of water and biscuits, questioning if he would really be all right. Leonard looked back and said it would not be a problem, reminding the instructor that survival and self-sufficiency were the goals of the training anyway. Leonard privately thought the whole exercise was really just a fight over badges. As Leonard continued into the woods, Bruno watched him go, thinking that entering the forest alone was dangerous in many ways. Another trainee, the blonde strategist Leonard Cardenas, approached Bruno and asked to speak with Leonard. Dylan caught up to Leonard and suggested that if he were willing, he should move with D Squad. Leonard did not even slow his pace, telling the boy to get lost and stating his business was none of Dylan's. Leonard watched the boy over his shoulder, thinking Dylan was a slippery person who likely intended to discard him at the first sign of danger. Dylan continued to push, claiming he did not understand why Leonard would refuse when every other squad had dozens or hundreds of members. Leonard told him he did not need to understand and had no need to explain himself, making it clear he had no intention of joining their little picnic. Dylan's face darkened as he wondered if Leonard's arrogance was a form of self-loathing, promising that the boy would regret it. Dylan declared that if words did not work, he would use force to convince him, lunging forward with his weapon. Leonard dodged the strike with a series of incredible movements, his footwork leaving the attacker stunned. Leonard countered in a flash, striking Dylan with the precision of an expert. Dylan gasped as he collapsed, realizing that Leonard had reached the level of an assassin at his age since the attack had been devoid of any detectable bloodlust. Bruno's hand suddenly landed on Leonard's shoulder, praising his good movement. He explained that since this was not the official start, he could not grant a promotion, but he allowed Leonard to depart first as the smallest group. Leonard simply said he understood and began his dash through the forest. He reflected on the instructor's hidden strength, noting that he had not even felt Bruno's presence despite his past life's experience. He admitted the family lived up to its name as the continent's greatest swordsman lineage, marveling at the extraordinary talent born one after another. He hypothesized there was a secret to the Cardenas bloodline, but decided he had to focus on the task at hand. Dashing through the lush greenery, Leonard vowed to first secure an advantageous hideout. Senior instructor Bruno stood at the entrance of the academy grounds, flanked by his guards as he surveyed the map. He commanded his subordinates to report the situation immediately after the start. An instructor with a red tie and a tactical screen replied, noting that an encounter had occurred with unusual speed this time. He explained that as soon as Group A entered the forest under Number 1's command, they raided Group C without even bothering to search for a base. The images on the monitor flickered as he confirmed that Group C, caught completely off guard, was decisively defeated. Clad in their dark uniforms, the trainees of Group C lay scattered across the forest floor, overwhelmed by the sudden assault. Aside from Number 3, who narrowly managed to dodge the initial strike, the instructor stated that they were wiped out. As she clutched her bleeding arm and fled deeper into the trees, her eyes burned with frustration and pain. Bruno listened intently to the update, his arms crossed over his armored chest. He found it interesting, acknowledging that he knew the boy was sharp, but he was surprised William would choose a surprise attack so early. A junior instructor standing beside him agreed, pointing out that there was such a difference in numbers to begin with. Bruno hummed in thought, suggesting that William likely did not make that decision based on the difference in military strength alone. He knew that for a larger group like Group A, the longer the battle lasted, the more disadvantaged they became in procuring supplies for everyone. He realized that William William utilized the advantage of numbers to attack early in the training when unity among the other groups was difficult. By ignoring the priority of securing a base and catching them off guard, he broke common sense. Bruno conceded that the boy was a cut above the rest, not just in skill but in strategy. He then asked for the report on Group B and Group D. The instructor adjusted the display, reporting that Group B and Group D had formed an alliance after learning of the situation involving Group C on the screen. Barita stood with her hand to her hair, her expression confident as Dylan stood tall beside her. Their goal was singular, focusing all their power to defeat their common enemy, number 1. Bruno nodded, calling it a wise decision and noting that their response was far faster than previous groups of trainees. He turned his head slightly, seeing potential in them. His gaze then shifted toward Instructor Colin, who was in charge of the remaining groups, and he asked for the next report. Colin, a woman with long blue hair and focused eyes, felt a prickle of nerves as she acknowledged Senior Instructor Bruno. She reported that there had not been much progress with Group E since their leader was chosen, but then she hesitated. She looked down at the documents in her hands, her eyes wide as she prepared to speak about number 25 of Group F. Colin admitted she did not even know where to begin explaining what she had seen. Deep in the woods, Colin crouched behind a thick tree trunk, her breathing shallow as she watched Leonard from the shadows. Suddenly, Leonard looked over his shoulder and called her out by name. Colin was startled, wondering if he had just called her. She was certain her presence hiding technique was at the highest level even among the instructors. Leonard turned his full body toward her, stating he had a question. Colin realized with shock that the child was completely aware of her position. She stepped out into the clearing, her hand on her hip as she asked what his question was. Leonard pointed toward a dark, looming cave and noted that as she could see, it seemed the cave had a master, and he would like to use it as his sleeping quarters. He asked if the beast inside was one tamed by Cardenas, explaining he thought it might be bad if he hurt or killed it. From the darkness of the cavern, a massive blue dire wolf emerged, its teeth bared and its eyes glowing with a feral blue light. Colin watched the beast, knowing it was a relatively safe dire wolf trained by the family. However, she knew it was impossible for a trainee to defeat such a creature alone. She felt a bead of sweat on her face, thinking she might need to step in if Leonard was bluffing. She told him she did not mind, as this was also part of the training. She informed him that if he could defeat it, he could do as he liked, whether he used the cave for a bed or a pantry. She smiled, challenging him to see if he could actually defeat it. The wolf let out a thunderous growl and lunged forward. Leonard watched the pet's movement with a calm gaze, thinking it had good movement for a creature of its kind. He decided he would go easy on it, leaping into the air with his wooden sword. He told the wolf there was no better place to sleep than this, and, with a sudden burst of power, asked the animal to leave. The wolf was sent tumbling back, its paws sliding across the dirt. Leonard landed gracefully, wondering if the beast had lost its reason because its killing intent was so high. He realized that if he held back and got injured, it would cause trouble for the instructor too. He felt the grip of his sword tighten, deciding that this was going to hurt a bit. In a blur of motion, Leonard struck again, his speed overwhelming the wolf's senses. He asked the beast if it really thought he would be eaten that easily. Watching from the sidelines, Colin was speechless as Leonard overwhelmed the creature in an instant. She began to doubt herself, asking if that was really the skill of a trainee. The massive wolf lay on the ground, whimpering in defeat as Leonard stood over it. Suddenly, the wolf's demeanor changed, and it began wagging its tails like a playful cub. Leonard told the creature to stay and then commanded it to sit. The wolf obeyed instantly, its tongue hanging out happily. He told it to roll over, and the beast flopped onto its back with a joyful sound. Finally, Leonard asked for a paw, and the creature lifted its limb to meet his hand. Leonard looked back at Instructor Colin and noted that since the beast had grown attached to him, he asked if he could have it accompany him for training. Colin swallowed hard, reflecting on the skill and unwavering decisiveness that could make a dire wolf submit like that. She admitted it was difficult but acknowledged that the fact he tamed it was undoubtedly a result of his own skill. She gave her permission under certain conditions, stating that participation in combat was prohibited but movement and exploration were allowed. Leonard turned back toward the forest, sighing and admitting that was his intention from the start. Colin held her head in her hands, telling him to make sure it did not harm other trainees. Leonard moved forward, thinking that the technique of using the wolf would be quite useful. He looked at the wolf and told his new companion to go look for food while he did his own task. Seeing a fork in the road, he decided they should split up. He told the wolf to bring back anything that caught its eye and sent the creature off into the brush. Nearby, a defeated trainee lay on the ground, looking up at a figure with terror and calling him a monster. William Cardenas stood over the broken trainees of Group E, calling them pathetic for sharing the Cardenas bloodline. He claimed there was no saving them, but noted he did not have any more room for badges. He looked down with cold eyes, telling the cowering boy he was lucky. He promised to make sure the trainee dropped out the next time they met. The defeated boy, number 438, gritted his teeth and cursed his bad luck. The leader of Group E, number 483, watched from a distance, thinking that they could not beat William even with their entire group attacking at once. He had known they had no chance of winning from the start and feared they were just easy prey. He felt his heart race as he wondered wondered what he was supposed to do as a leader who was forced into the role. His squad members gathered around, asking their leader what they should do now. They realized they were lucky to be saved this time, but if they were attacked by another group, it would be over. The leader stared into the woods, wondering if this was as far as they could go. He tried to rally his team, telling everyone to pull themselves together and go look for food. He suggested that if they hid and waited for a chance, they might survive. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over the group. The trainees' faces twisted in sheer horror as they looked up at a gargantuan bear with glowing red eyes. They realized they were really going to become food and despaired over dying in such a way. A heavy weight crashed down as Leonard suddenly descended from the sky. With a single, devastating move, Leonard slammed into the bear's skull. The beast roared in agony as Leonard landed firmly on its head. The Group E leader looked up in awe, stuttering as he recognized the figure stood before him. There stood number 25, his presence radiant under the forest canopy. The massive beast lay dead on the scorched earth as Leonard stood over the carcass, his expression unreadable. Trainee number 483 watched the scene with a mix of terror and frustration, his face contorted as he asked just what else Leonard was trying to take from them. Though the group had actually been saved by his intervention, they remained defensive, bitter that they could not beat the monster anyway and lamenting that even their several days' worth of rations were now at risk. Calling him a heartless brute, the leader was stunned when the golden-haired youth simply asked if they were all right. Caught off guard by the unexpected question, the boy stammered in confusion until Leonard repeated himself with a calm, steady gaze. The trainees admitted they were not hurt, but their suspicion lingered as Leonard gave a short, affirmative nod and stated it was good. As he turned to leave, the leader shouted for him to wait, demanding to know if he truly had not come there to steal their badges. Leonard looked back over his shoulder, his red eyes piercing as he explained it looked dangerous, so he just came to help. He clarified that his goal wasn't winning or losing but was simply training, and since he could procure his own food, he didn't need their badges. As the boys stood in stunned silence, Leonard added one final, cold truth, stating that if he wanted to win, he would have picked the right opponents to beat. The trainees processed this, realizing Leonard had reached his high rank in an incredibly short time. The leader bowed his head, admitting they owed him one and thanking him for helping them avoid being eliminated. Leonard began to walk away, but a sudden, massive presence caused him to pause. The trainees panicked as a heavy shadow fell across the clearing, and from the brush, the giant dire wolf emerged, its blue eyes glowing with a feral intensity. The group cried out in fear, but Leonard simply commanded the beast to sit. To their absolute shock, the massive predator dropped onto its haunches like a well-trained pet. Leonard's attention shifted as he looked down at an unconscious body lying among the rocks, letting out a curious sound. The group leader realized with a gasp that it was number 3, the blue-haired girl who had been the leader of Group C. He marveled at how someone so powerful could be so badly beaten, thinking to himself that if they only had her badge, they would definitely be able to survive this training. Seeing the giant wolf stand loyally behind Leonard, the trainees found the beast scary but admitted the youth was even scarier. Leonard knelt down to inspect her injuries, noting the wounds were deep. He found it strange that a fierce fighter who was usually hard to even scratch had been beaten this badly, wondering if it was a monster or perhaps number 1 or number 2 who had done it. He addressed number 438, asking if he really just didn't want to be eliminated. When the boy defensively confirmed it and asked if Leonard was going to call him pathetic, Leonard simply pointed to the dead bear and told them that instead of a badge, he would give them that since it should be enough to eat. The trainees rejoiced at the generous offer, and Leonard declared their transaction complete. He gave one final, stern piece of advice, telling them not to let numbers dictate everything before disappearing into the forest. The leader watched him go with the massive wolf, wondering if number 25 had actually been a good guy all along, while Leonard privately felt like there was a weird misunderstanding brewing. Sometime later at the mouth of a dark cave, the blue-haired girl finally woke up and looked toward the starry night sky. Confused, she wondered where she was and questioned who had applied the bandages to her arms. Leonard's voice cut through the silence, asking if she was awake. She reacted instantly with a powerful kick that Leonard caught with a dull impact against his arm. Holding her legs steady, he noted her legs seemed fine and told her to stop wasting her energy and get some proper rest. She glared at him, demanding her badge back, but Leonard stared at her blankly until he realized she thought he had stolen it. He looked toward the campfire, stating he appreciated her for saving him, but he could not hand over his badge. He clarified that he never intended to steal hers anyway and told her to sit by the fire and eat. He held out a skewer of roasting meat, causing her to ask if he was sure. Leonard told her not to be shy as there was plenty left, and she finally accepted the food, eating with a desperate hunger. Leonard remarked that a kid was starving so he had to feed her something, then asked if she was in Group C and what exactly happened to her. She chewed the meat slowly, and when he asked if she met a monster or something, she grimly replied that she had not. Her eyes darkened with memory as she explained that right after they set up their base, they were ambushed and wiped out by Group A. She called it a massacre where they could not even put up a proper fight, admitting she felt pathetic as a leader for being unable to do anything. Leonard listened to the fire crackling, acknowledging that while she might have stood a chance in a one-on-one, a battle against many was a different story and everyone's lack of experience surely showed. He gazed into the embers, stating that even so, the way to win would be through preemptive suppression and ambushes. He noted it was naturally difficult for youngsters with a shallow knowledge of strategy, then asked if it was number 1 who had injured her arm. She confirmed it, stating that even compared to number 2, number 1 was on a completely different level. She lamented that her group lacked the strength, but then shouted with sudden fire that she was frustrated they lost without even being able to fight back. Leonard smiled slightly at her resolve, thinking that her fighting spirit would not fade even after the defeat and that she was going to become a fine warrior. Standing outside the cave, he surveyed the landscape and noted the situation was bad, realizing it was only a matter of time before Group B and Group D collapsed as well. The girl asked if it was possible they had formed an alliance, but Leonard explained that the morale of those who have tasted victory will soar, which can overcome a difference in military strength. As the wolf slept nearby, he added that even if those groups allied, they could not beat Group A in numbers. He admitted a strategic ambush would be his best move, but knew number 1 would surely be prepared for it. Looking at a vision of the powerful William, Leonard mused it was a bit much to go this far against kids. He declared they would target Group A's weakness instead, and when she asked what that was, he stated they would focus all their attacks on number 1. He explained that Group A functioned entirely around him, and while they were fast to unite because their central pillar was strong, the moment that pillar snapped, they would become nothing more than a disorganized mob. He looked back at her, noting she looked like she wanted revenge, and when she confirmed it, Leonard simply told her to trust him. Clenching her bandaged hand with renewed determination, she stood tall and asked if in that case, she should call him leader. Under the harsh sun of the great forest, the large contingent of Team A marched in a long line, their heavy packs weighing them down. William, the formidable number 1, watched them with a calculating gaze, noting that while they were late, time was strictly on their side. He assured his nearby subordinate that as long as the current situation held, their victory was certain. His eyes narrowed with a sharp intensity as he sensed an approaching presence, realizing they would have a result soon. Suddenly, shouts erupted from the trees as scouts ordered their units to halt and prepare for battle. The forest floor echoed with the sound of rapid footsteps as the confrontation began. William stood his ground, mockingly stating that while it was one thing to hide because one knew their place, it would be far wiser to surrender once they realized they had no chance of winning. He commanded the hidden trainees to stop hiding and come out into the open. As if responding to a signal, a massive group of trainees emerged from the shadows, led by Burita and Dylan. Burita noted with a smirk that the leisurely lion had a sharper nose than expected, or perhaps he was closer to a dog than a lion. William tightened his grip on his weapon, retorting that those standing at the top could easily read the thoughts of those below, and he dismissed their shallow wits as unworthy of discussion. Burita's smile never reached her eyes as she called him a disgrace to the Cardenas family, prompting William to ask if she simply loved acting high and mighty in front of people. She laughed, likening him more to a peacock than a dog, but he snapped back, calling her a brainless woman and claiming he was showing her true dignity. Without another word, an explosion of force rocked the clearing as the two sides clashed with a deafening impact. Burita commanded her group to attack and decimate Team A, while Team A's leaders urged their members to solidify the defense and not let the enemy break through. A chorus of battle cries rose among the trees as the melee turned chaotic. Engaging directly with William, Burita struggled against his sheer power, wondering internally what his trait could be. She felt every blow as a heavy, bone-jarring impact and realized her wrists were throbbing despite her guarding. She found it impossible to track his strikes even with her special eyes, seeing him as a monster whose power defied her logic. With a desperate shout, she launched an assault, but William caught their wooden blades with a gloved hand, asking if those petty tricks were all they came to show him. He delivered a brutal strike that sent his opponent reeling, coughing up blood in agony. Burita spotted what she thought was an opening from the rear, certain it would be difficult for him to defend his back, but as she lunged, she froze. She saw the subtle movement of his muscles and realized that the opening was far too large to be an accident. Her eyes widened in terror as she understood he had intended for her to strike from the very beginning. With a blur of steel, William countered, telling her she was better than number 4, but was simply too slow to realize his trap. He mocked her special eyes, stating they were clearly not perfect before closing the distance and whispering that he could see her movements slowly. Unlike the elusive number 25, he claimed she was easy to read. With a sudden burst of blue aura, he struck her down, her scream echoing through the clearing. He stood over her broken form, noting she did not amount to much despite her earlier provocations. He commanded the number 2 to admit defeat, declaring that she could not beat him anyway as he proclaimed himself the winner of the training exercise. However, a calm voice interrupted the silence. silence, calling his statement a hasty judgment. William spun around to see Leonard approaching, casually dragging the unconscious body of Team A's number 5 behind him. The sight left both William and Burita in total shock as Leonard dropped the high-ranking trainee. Leonard stated it was nothing major and he had simply come to pay them back for what they did to his team. William was livid, asking what he was doing there and screaming that Leonard should not even have a team. Leonard replied coolly that he did not at first, then pointed toward the forest and told them to look. A massive wave of combined trainees from the lower ranks suddenly charged toward Team A, their leader shouting that William should witness the rebellion of those he once deemed worthless. The previously weak trainees celebrated as they reclaimed their badges, cheering for the survival of their groups and shouting for the long life of number 25. Leonard stood with the blue-haired number 3, apologizing for interrupting their celebration. The group leader was confused by their sudden arrival and asked if Leonard expected the badges back, but Leonard extended a hand of friendship instead, asking them to form an alliance. The leader hesitated, arguing that their team was weak and would only be a burden, but Leonard reminded them of his earlier lesson to not be bound by numbers. He explained that as warriors of Cardenas who received the same training, there was not a huge difference in their potential, and that numbers were nothing more than name tags. He argued that since even branch family members like number 3 could rise so high through effort, everyone was capable of overtaking the rest with their own strength. When the leader protested, claiming they were at the bottom of the barrel, Leonard countered that the problem was not just their skill, but their lack of courage. He challenged them to believe in themselves and their limits, promising that if they did not, then he would believe in them instead. He officially proposed an alliance to defeat number 1 together, and inspired by his words, the unit rallied with a roar to seize victory. Back in the forest clearing, William stood before the defiant number 3, who told him she followed Leonard because he was truly stronger. She mocked William's team, noting that his underlings were currently being defeated by the very people he looked down on. Burita suddenly collapsed to her knees, stating she would surrender and join Team F instead, with Dylan quickly following suit out of collective desire to see number 1 fall. Pushed to the brink of rage, William accused them of having no pride as Cardenas descendants, but Leonard countered by asking if anyone present did not carry that same blood. He told the number 1 trainee to stop being stubborn and admit defeat. Seething with a dark aura, William pointed his blade at Leonard, challenging him to a final duel to settle the fate of Team A and Team F once and for all. He vowed to personally show Leonard the gap in their power, but Leonard simply smirked and agreed, noting those were his own words. As a golden light erupted from Leonard's body, he beckoned his rival forward, promising that he would be the one to make William realize the truth. Most people miss the real story. Subscribe if you want to see everything.